saying pull the trigger to kill your son? No, memory. Love you.
You're charged with carrying concealed firearm, which, if convicted, has some serious consequences.
Titus Colbert's courtroom appearance was anything but ordinary. Facing charges of 3 counts of attempted murder and possession of a firearm, Colbert was in serious trouble. It all started when police were called to the scene of a domestic dispute at his ex-girlfriend's apartment. Armed and dangerous, Colbert opened fire on the responding officers. The standoff lasted for 5 hours, and authorities had to shut down nearby roads and even suspend flights at a nearby airport. Miraculously, no one was hurt, and Colbert was taken into custody, but that was just the beginning of his bizarre behavior.
May 1st, 1776. May 1st, 1776. May 1st, 1776.
When it came time for his arraignment, things took an unexpected turn. Instead of focusing on the serious charges he was facing, Colbert chose to deliver what could only be described as a conspiracy-laced history lesson. Over and over again, he mentioned May 1st, 1776, an important date linked to the founding of the Illuminati, a secret society surrounded by countless conspiracy theories. But he didn't stop there. At one point, he even began singing "We Are the Illuminati" in the courtroom, leaving everyone, especially the judge, stunned and frustrated. The courtroom was clearly not the place for Colbert's impromptu Illuminati performance. His outbursts became so disruptive that he was removed from the courtroom, and the judge ordered a psychiatric evaluation. Given his strange and erratic behavior, it was crucial to determine whether he was fit to stand trial. After multiple evaluations, Colbert was found competent enough to face the charges against him, despite his earlier outlandish actions. This wasn't the end of his courtroom antics, though. During subsequent appearances, Colbert continued to bring up the Illuminati and act out in strange ways. However, the court proceedings moved forward, and nearly 2.5 years after the incident, Colbert changed his plea from not guilty to guilty. In exchange for his plea, prosecutors agreed to drop several charges, including some related to the attempted murders of peace officers. In the end, Colbert was sentenced to 20 years in prison, far less than the 105 years he could have faced if convicted of all charges. Ronnie O'Neal's trial in the 13th Judicial Circuit Court in Tampa was unlike anything you'd expect from a typical murder case. O'Neal, facing serious charges, decided to represent himself, and what unfolded in that courtroom left people stunned. This was not just a regular defendant standing trial for his life. It was a man seemingly embracing the chaos around him. O'Neal was charged with first-degree murder for killing his girlfriend, Kenyatta Barron, and second-degree murder for the brutal killing of his daughter. On top of that, he was charged with attempted first-degree murder for attacking his son, Ronnie Jr., and arson, among other things.
I did kill Kenyatta Barron, but I want you to tell it like it is if you gonna tell it.
From the start, his behavior was erratic, swinging between moments of defiance and chilling admissions. During his closing arguments, he stood in the courtroom and loudly admitted, "I did kill Ken," referring to his girlfriend. It was a moment that sent chills through everyone watching. Admitting to murder in such an open and almost casual manner is something you don't see every day.
Did I hurt you that night of this incident?
Yes.
I did. And how did I hurt you?
You stabbed me.
But perhaps the most unsettling part of the trial was when O'Neal cross-examined his son, Ronnie Jr. His son had survived a brutal attack that night. O'Neal had stabbed him and left him for dead. During the trial, Ronnie Jr., who'd suffered unimaginable trauma, took the stand as a witness for the prosecution. What followed was something no one could have anticipated. O'Neal questioned his son, asking him, "How did I hurt you?" The boy, incredibly brave given the circumstances, responded, "You stabbed me." This moment was deeply disturbing for everyone involved. The image of a father questioning the child he had tried to kill is one that will haunt those who witnessed it. The fact that O'Neal was able to confront his son in such a way was a clear example of just how twisted the trial had become. Despite his bizarre courtroom antics, including shouting at the jury and delivering fiery speeches, Ronnie O'Neal couldn't escape the consequences of his horrific actions. After hearing all the evidence and witnessing his shocking behavior, the jury convicted him on all charges. The sentencing was severe. O'Neal received 3 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole, along with an additional 90 years for other charges, including the attempted murder of his son. In Cleveland, Ohio, TJ Lane's sentencing hearing became one of the most disturbing moments ever witnessed in a courtroom. Lane had been convicted for the 2012 school shooting at Chardon High School, where he killed 3 students and wounded others. Facing the families of his victims during his sentencing, Lane didn't show an ounce of remorse. Instead, what he did next left everyone in the courtroom stunned and horrified. As the victims' families were delivering their impact statements, expressing their deep grief and the unimaginable loss of their children, Lane did something no one could have anticipated. He stood up, removed his dress shirt, and revealed a white t-shirt underneath with the word killer scrawled across it in black marker. The room, already filled with raw emotion, fell silent in shock. It was a chilling, taunting gesture, a slap in the face to the grieving families who'd come to court seeking justice.
Saying pull the trigger, the killer's done. Memory. Love you.
But Lane wasn't done. As the families continued speaking, heartbroken and devastated by his lack of humanity, Lane raised his hand, smirking, and delivered the statement that would forever be etched in their memories. This was a direct and cruel insult to the parents who'd lost their children to his senseless violence. The callousness of his words was beyond comprehension. He wasn't just showing indifference to their pain, he was mocking it, reveling in the suffering he'd caused. The courtroom erupted in outrage. Some family members broke down and others shouted in anger. The judge, though disgusted by Lane's behavior, had to maintain control of the proceedings. The families of the victims were already grappling with their immense grief, and Lane's actions that day made an already unbearable situation even worse. Despite his shocking courtroom performance, the legal system didn't waver. TJ Lane was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. It was the harshest punishment available to him, and while it didn't bring back the lives he'd stolen, it ensured that he would never walk free again.
You're charged with carrying concealed firearm, which, if convicted, has some serious consequences.
In Miami, Florida, one courtroom moment felt like it was ripped straight out of a Batman comic. Lawrence Sullivan, who had fully embraced the persona of the infamous Batman villain, the Joker, appeared in court with tattoos that made him look disturbingly similar to the character. His green hair, facial tattoos, and eerie grin didn't go unnoticed. But this wasn't just cosplay. Sullivan was there to face charges for carrying a concealed firearm, and the situation was anything but a joke. Sullivan, known locally as the Miami Joker, had been arrested after waving a handgun at passing cars, which led to his charge of carrying a concealed weapon. While his Joker-like appearance was jarring, the judge remained unfazed by his unsettling look, focusing instead on the seriousness of the crime. A firearm charge in Florida comes with significant consequences, and it was clear that Sullivan's appearance wouldn't play a role in the court's decision. This was strictly about the law.
You don't want the public defender's office to represent you?
I mean, you can represent me, but I'm trying to get bonded out, my honor.
Well, they're there to help you, sir. You don't have a lawyer.
All right.
I mean, okay, so...
I didn't feel like signing the paperwork. I'm really not in the mood for that.
Interestingly, Sullivan declined the assistance of a public defender, attempting to handle his case without legal representation. While this move often raises eyebrows, especially for someone facing a serious charge like a concealed firearm violation, the court proceeded as usual. The judge set Sullivan's bond at $5,000, making it clear that even with his Joker-like appearance, he wouldn't receive any special treatment. Later, Sullivan was found guilty of carrying a concealed firearm and was sentenced to 2 years of probation. Though he avoided jail time, the consequences of his actions were still significant, and his bizarre persona certainly didn't help his case. Walking around Miami resembling one of Gotham's most notorious villains while carrying a gun may seem like something out of a comic book, but in real life, it came with very real penalties. What makes this moment so weird is the sheer contrast between Sullivan's appearance and the seriousness of the charges against him. Seeing a man who looks like the Joker standing before a judge on gun charges creates a surreal atmosphere, almost like fiction colliding with reality. While tattoos are a personal choice, and many people get creative with their ink, when you pair that look with a firearm charge, it becomes a courtroom scene that's hard to forget. In Clark County, Nevada, what started as a regular court proceeding quickly escalated into a scene of chaos when Deborah Wren, a man with a history of violent behavior, attacked Judge Mary Kay Holthus in the middle of his sentencing. Wren had already been facing serious charges after swinging a baseball bat at his brother-in-law during an altercation, but things took an even darker turn when his plea for probation was rejected, pushing him to make a dangerous and reckless decision in the courtroom. Wren's case was centered around an incident where he had threatened his brother-in-law with a bat, reportedly swinging it in a fit of rage after after a dispute about a stolen vehicle. When police arrived at the scene, they arrested Wren, and his legal troubles only mounted from there. Fast forward to his sentencing in Judge Holthus's courtroom, where Wren, alongside his defense attorney, made a desperate bid for probation, arguing that he had a new job and was on a path to turn his life around. But Judge Holthus wasn't convinced. Given Wren's lengthy criminal history and the severity of his most recent actions, she was not inclined to grant him probation. As she began delivering her decision, Wren's frustration boiled over. Without warning, he lunged at Judge Holthus in a violent outburst, attempting to physically assault her right there in the courtroom. The sudden attack sent shockwaves through the room, with everyone scrambling to react. Fortunately, courtroom security acted swiftly. Officers were able to subdue Wren before he could seriously harm the judge, but the damage was already done, both to the courtroom's sense of order and to Wren's legal situation. What had started as a plea for leniency had now turned into a much more serious case. Wren was immediately charged with multiple additional offenses, including attempted murder, battery on a protected person, and intimidation of a public officer. Wren's violent attack on Judge Holthus only worsened his situation, sealing his fate in court. His chance at probation was long gone, and the additional charges stacked up, ensuring he would be facing much more time behind bars. Instead of turning his life around as he claimed, Wren's actions showed the court that he was far from ready to re-enter society.
There's no way I'm going to try this case or have any further proceedings, or I have to see you for one further second. Set for the mere hearing next week.
In Paris, Kentucky, Base Webb's courtroom outburst was just another chapter in a long history of violent and reckless behavior. Already on trial for attempted murder, Webb shocked everyone when he spat at Judge Vanessa Dixon during his sentencing. But to fully understand this moment, you have to go back to the events that led him to being in court in the first place. Webb's troubles began with a deliberate and violent act that could have easily ended in tragedy. He was driving near a detention center when he attempted to run over two jail employees with his car. One of the employees managed to escape unharmed, but the other wasn't as lucky. He was pinned against the wall by Webb's vehicle and suffered serious injuries. This horrifying incident was captured on surveillance footage, leaving no doubt about Webb's intentions. It was clear that he wasn't just acting out of impulse. This was a calculated attempt to harm people. When Webb was arrested and brought to trial, his defiance and aggression didn't stop. Throughout the proceedings, he displayed a lack of remorse that was unsettling to everyone present. But the situation took a shocking turn when Judge Vanessa Dixon, citing a conflict of interest, announced that she would be stepping down from the trial because she knew one of the jail employees Webb had targeted. As Judge Dixon explained her decision, Webb, in a blatant act of disrespect, leaned forward and spat directly at her. The courtroom was stunned. This wasn't just an outburst of frustration. It was a calculated, aggressive act aimed at undermining the court's authority. Security quickly intervened and removed Webb from the courtroom, but the damage was done. Webb had not only sealed his fate in this case, but he'd also further demonstrated the violent tendencies that had brought him to this point. Webb's actions didn't just shock those in attendance. They also added more weight to his sentence. In addition to the 15 years he was initially facing for attempted assault on a jail employee, Webb was later sentenced to 52 years in prison for his various charges, including attempted murder. But his legal troubles didn't end there. Webb had also been convicted in a separate case for the murder of his ex-girlfriend, a crime for which he received a life sentence. In Michigan, the sentencing of Harvey Wiz became an unforgettable and emotional spectacle in the courtroom. Wiz had been convicted of torturing a 3-year-old child who'd been left in his care. The details of the case were horrific. The child had suffered severe burns, a lacerated liver, and multiple other injuries, including a bite mark. The prosecution had successfully argued that these injuries were the result of deliberate, sadistic acts of torture. By the time the sentencing day arrived, everyone in the courtroom knew the gravity of Wiz's actions.
The sentence of this court on count 1, torture, that you serve 380 months to 65 years in the Michigan Department of Corrections.
When Judge Darlene O'Brien read out the sentence, it was clear that Wiz was about to face the consequences of his brutal behavior. He was sentenced to 31 years in prison for torturing and abusing the child, along with additional time for resisting arrest when officers came to take him into custody. It was a harsh but deserved sentence, considering the unimaginable pain he had inflicted on the young victim.
No, what I do? I ain't do nothing. No, this ain't right.
But as the judge's words hit him, Wiz couldn't hold it together. The moment the sentence was delivered, he erupted into a loud, uncontrollable outburst. He screamed, crying out in disbelief. and then collapsed to the floor of the courtroom. His breakdown was so extreme that the proceedings had to be halted. Court officers rushed to calm him down, but it took hours before order could be restored, and the sentencing could continue. The courtroom, which had already been filled with tension, became even more intense as Wiz's emotional outburst unfolded. Spectators, lawyers, and even court staff watched as this convicted child torturer, who had shown no mercy to his young victim, crumbled under the weight of his punishment. For many, it was hard to feel sympathy for a man who had caused so much suffering to an innocent child, but his reaction was undeniably dramatic. Wiz's emotional breakdown didn't change the outcome. His sentence remained intact, 31 years for the torture and abuse charges, which would be served consecutively with additional time for resisting arrest. The judge made it clear that there would be no leniency, no matter how extreme his reaction to the sentencing was. So what are your thoughts on this? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel.